So, one small disclaimer before I get started, fighting a little bit of a cold. So, if I lose my voice, we'll just do the rest in interpretive dance. So, I just want to talk a little bit about how when I graduated here in 2001, what it was like for me to come out with a full sail education and how that turned into a game design career for me. Just kind of run you through where I was, what I did, how all that happened, and try to teach a little bit of what I learned. Maybe it'll help some of you out. So this is what my resume looked like coming out of Full Sail. There was only an associate's degree at the time, and a lot of the stuff here looks familiar to you, I'm sure. We did design documents, C++ focused. We didn't do much in the way of editors and things like that. It was very much coding centric. We did our asteroids project, which I don't know if you guys still do that, but that was the big thing back then. And then we did some group projects. One of the things that we didn't have was any art support. So this is the kind of stuff that we did as clearly designer and programmer art. These are the kind of things that we did to put into our games, and we scoured the internet for any kind of art we could find that would, be beneficial, look right, and help us to focus on the actual gameplay and creating the fun. Our final project, we had 3 game dev students in our final project in each group. We had no art support. We had no animation support. It was just us. And we created a turn-based strategy game, and I was actually able to do the first internet playable game here, which I used MFC for, and couldn't do it again. I don't remember how I did most of it, but it was something that I really felt like I wanted to try and do because turn-based strategy games are a big passion of mine, and I wanted to try and get one that we could play online. So when I graduated, when I was looking to get a job in 2000, it was really difficult to get noticed. The only things you really had was industry forums, and there weren't very many of them, and personal websites. And so, it was kind of difficult to actually, get noticed and meet people. Today, it's kind of hard not to get noticed. There's so many outlets these days that your presence is easily everywhere. And you have to be careful, because when you get out there, you want to be yourself, but you got to be careful. You never know who's watching. One of the things I can say for sure is that most employers now, when you interview or are looking to get a job somewhere, will look for your internet presence and to see what kind of a person you are. So if things are out there that, aren't very good, or you're saying things out there that could be a little disrespectful, that can come back to haunt you pretty quickly. So you just have to be careful. But it's really important to be out there. The reason I bring this up is because that's how I actually got my first job interview. When I was finishing up school here, the IGDA had their own forums at the time, and that was kind of the place where industry people would talk online. And one of my fellow students was on there kind of dissing the program. And we were talking back and forth, and I was kind of talking about the good points, making sure that people understood that I felt his opinion was his own, and that that the education you get here is quite good. What I didn't know is that the CEO of a new company was actually monitoring these forums, liked what I had to say, and contacted the school to get my information. So that was how I actually got my first interview, and subsequently got my first job in the industry. So the company was called eMusement. It was a new studio founded by a bunch of EverQuest developers. And they got together, started making an MMO for Square, a superhero MMO. And we were going to launch close to the time of Final Fantasy XI to be the second product on Play Online. So for me, this was huge, because while I was here, when I wasn't working on what I should have been working on, I was playing EverQuest. So that was a big thing for me. That was how I'd like to spend my downtime. Plus, always been a huge fan of Square. Final Fantasy II is my favorite game of all time. So, that to me, that was like a dream come true to be able to work on this stuff. So when I got there, I didn't expect that most of my job would be writing. Coming out of Full Sail, where I just got a very technical background, a very programming-based education, we were early in pre-production on this game, so we were doing mission designs, we were doing NPC designs. It was literally all writing. And for me, and this is where I went in as a designer. So for me, it was like trying to figure out, how can I utilize my skill set in a way that will be beneficial when I'm doing things that aren't exactly what I had just been taught. So we used the LithTech engine there, but I didn't use it at all. So what that actually meant for me was playing lots of No One Lives Forever with the rest of the group, which is great because team building exercises are awesome, and we had a lot of fun playing together. But I didn't actually get much use of my background at this time. So, but the important thing that I learned here is that being a designer is all about being a communicator. You have to, it's the most important skill of a designer. You have to basically not only come up with ideas, but the most important thing is making sure that they are clear, concise, everyone's on the same page as soon as possible so you can eliminate rework. One of the biggest lessons I've learned in this industry is when a programmer or an artist has to redo work because of miscommunication, they're not very happy with you. And that doesn't breed the kind of camaraderie that you're looking for in that team environment. So, but the thing that I did learn is that my programming background equaled programmer respect. What I mean by that is whenever I would go to a programmer looking for something that I needed on the design side, I was able to talk intelligently about what it was I was looking for. So there was always a very good dialogue back and forth. We were on the same page. I knew when I was asking for something, what I was asking for, what kind of work it was going to take, and how that was, going to be able for us to work together to get what we're looking for in the least amount of work possible. So then we come to the end of eMusement, and what happened was the Final Fantasy movie. So the movie had a $150 million budget, and then grossed around $80 million worldwide. So when a company loses $60 million on a project, they've got to find a way to recuperate. And basically what they did was pulled in all external funding at that time for everything. Since that's the only thing that our company had, that meant we didn't have any more money. So thus the end of eMusement, unfortunately. So this is where it's really important that I bring up the importance of conferences, specifically GDC, things of this nature. I mean, they have their normal benefits that everyone knows about, the lectures and the roundtables and the independent things that you can do. But the most important thing, in my opinion, about them is the networking. You cannot underestimate the value of meeting people in this industry. This industry is tiny. And literally, I've worked with people at different places. You end up bumping into them. You end up staying in contact with them. From eMusement, I met friends that actually got me jobs at other places down the road, or helped me get jobs. So, there's a lot of that goes on here, and there's so few companies overall, and it's such a tight community that it's really important to meet as many people as you can as soon as you can. And I bring up GDC because that's actually how I got my second job. When I was at GDC the year before with eMusement, I met the studio head of a company called Lucky Chicken Games, and we got to know each other, had drinks together, and later, when I was looking for a job after eMusement, flipping through all of my business cards, I looked at their website, and there was nothing listed as far as game design. So I emailed him directly, and I just said, hey, looking for work, anything available? And he told me, he said, we're always looking for good designers. So that taught me another lesson, which is, they don't always post everything. Sometimes a good person comes along, they'll make an exception. They'll hire someone if they're a good fit, whether or not they have an open rec or not. So you have to try. Don't annoy places, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask and see if there's something available. What I found here was more writing. So for me, this was an interesting thing. I became the document guy. And it was pretty bad because a lot of the designers there actually had pretty poor grammar. So a lot of the time I spent actually correcting things that they had written to make sure before it went out to anyone else that they could understand what was being asked. On top of that, I wrote a lot of proposals, and this was the fun part for me because they did a lot of games for the Game Boy Advance and things like that. So I was always coming up with new ideas for small games to pitch. So at least I got to have fun doing that part of it when I wasn't, working on these other design docs. So I came in near the end of production on a Casper game for the PS2 and helped them with some QA on it when I wasn't doing the writing. When there was a kit, and this is when I learned that some studios don't have a lot of money. So there actually wasn't enough dev kits for everyone. So I kind of had to try and work with people and juggle, okay, I'm working on something here now. When can I have some time to help look at this and use the kit later on? So there was a juggling act there, trying to be productive in many ways as I could and help move things along. So I did get my first credit here, I suppose you would say. It was a QA credit, since that was all that I did on the game. But hey, I'm new to the industry, second job. Happy to have something I could put on my resume. But then the game shipped, and they laid off most of the studio. Over the next, few months, they slowly started letting most of the people go, to where they got down to just a few people and started, they actually changed the company name and started doing mobile games. But that's, 2 studios, 2 closures, 2 for 2. This is when things started to turn around for me. And this is where I bring up again online presence, because Oddworld actually found my resume online. And they contacted me. We talked a little bit. They emailed me a design test. And I wanted to iterate, for anyone that's interested in being an actual designer, start taking design tests now. And I don't mean taking them for a company. I mean, find any that you can, read them, and start practicing. Because this does 2 things for you. One, it helps you focus in your thoughts on what people want to hear from you about what you think about design and how you approach things as a designer. So you get that practice of focusing yourself, but also you start to get out there and see what people are looking for, so you're able to better be prepared for when you do one of these down the road. And this is something you could do now. You could be this could be your first month here, and this is something you can start practicing on and just getting ready for way down the road. It's never too early to be ready for that portion of your career. So they did the phone interview. Then they brought me on for an on-site interview. That's another thing I would highly suggest, is do practice interviews with people. It's amazing how uncomfortable people can be in an interview. And it's really important that the first impression that you give them is confidence, and that you are not fumbling over your words. And the more you can practice, the more it will help you to be able to be comfortable in that situation. Even if you're just practicing with a fellow schoolmate, hit each other with hard questions, try and throw each other off. Get it to where, you're comfortable with thinking on your feet as much as possible. Some of it's unavoidable. You're going to be nervous, but as much as you can do to help will be great. So when you're going on for an interview, you need to research the company. You have to play their games. I cannot tell you how many people I have interviewed, and I asked them, hey, have you played Red Faction Guerrilla? No, I haven't played it. Really? Okay. So what I want to know as a developer is how you can help me make the game that I'm making. I'm not interested in you making the game that you want to make. That's for you down the road. I want to know how you can help me make this one. And if you don't even know about the games that we're making, how are you going to help me? I mean, you get a huge leg up if when you're talking, you can at least talk intelligently about what it is they make. A lot of the questions that we ask in interviews are, what did you like or not like about the games that we've made previously? What would you improve on? We want to see how familiar you are with our games, and how you think about what we've done and ways that we can improve it. Another thing I highly recommend is researching the tools that the company uses. I found out that Oddworld used Maya, which I had never used at all. So I spent the next 2 weeks before flying out there learning everything that I could about it, because I wanted to be able to talk intelligently about the tool, give them a base knowledge, and show that I had, if nothing else, that I showed the dedication to start learning what they're going to use, and be honest with them about, I'm willing to learn. I may not know it yet, but I'm going to do what it takes to learn what you need me to learn. So this is where I found out that designers can do a lot. A designer was responsible for a lot of things at Oddworld. We did all the level design and the layout, all the scripting, all the character creation, we wrote all the dialogue. We did a whole bunch of things there. So this is where I learned that having a programming background as a designer was key, because of all the scripting languages that I would have to use. Programming knowledge helped me to be able to do that easily. Scripting was a breeze with having a programming background. So now we're talking. Like this, I'm finally getting to do what I learned to do. I get to do stuff that's fun, I get to use my background, and I get to be in charge of big chunks of a game. So I just want to talk a little bit like what we went through and kind of what our process was at Oddworld. Everything started with, which I'm sure you guys are learning or have learned here, with the planning at the beginning. Doing paper maps, figuring out how do things fit into the story, what kind of encounters are we looking for, and basically trying to plan as much of it as possible on paper before anything is actually built in the game. Then we moved into the creation process where we did blue box layouts, very basic and crude visually, so there was never any mistaking this is what it's going to look like. No one cares at this point. We want to focus on getting it in there, making it fun, trying to create the representation that we had initially created on paper, and going in there and putting in all the AI, putting in all the dialogue, anything that you can put in as soon as possible to feel the experience before it leaves your hands. But the main focus was making it fun. And this is what I enjoyed most. This was me with a tool set and an idea, and I was in there and I was making something fun. And I made it fun and I completed it before it went into the next stage, before someone turned it into a beautiful area as well. And so then we would hand it off we work closely with the artist, we'd be paired with one. We'd hand these areas. This is actually the area that I showed before in Blue Block, now in a finished version. So, there's at this point, there is a lot of back and forth where whenever possible, they would create verbatim the space that we created, but sometimes to do something a little more artistically, they need a little bit of wiggle room. So it was a little bit of back and forth and making sure that my gameplay stayed as fun as it was while they were still able to do the things they wanted to do visually. So one of the first things that I did when I was there was, when I came on board, they decided they now had time in the schedule to create some new bounties in the game, and kind of one of the boss battles. And so I came up with the idea for Joe Mama, which was basically a mother that had dozens and dozens of kids that were kind of her minions. But the thing that was interesting was I got to come up with the character. I got to write all of her dialogue, all of her son's dialogue. I got to come up with new mechanics where I created a new electric wire mechanic that was time-based. I got to create this giant pile driver that worked in the world. And I did all of this. So I was able to go in and basically, I owned this right from the beginning. So we took the same process, went in, I created something very basic visually, hooked it into the animation system, set up everything gameplay-wise, had the thing fully functioning, timing the way that I wanted, had the gameplay in there and functional, and then again was able to just hand that off, and they made a representation of that looked nice and was functional the way that I needed it in game. And so then, as before, they took everything and kind of turned it into something that was beautiful while keeping its function. So New York City was the third town in the game. We kind of built things with hubs. And this was the third one, and I was responsible for the entire game state script here. And for me, what that meant was I was handed an empty C file, essentially, and told to go to town. So I basically had to create a whole management system where I'm monitoring, okay, send me variables from your level when it's finished. Let me know when this is done. And I'm basically turning things off and on, making sure the game flow is happening the way it's intended based on all these outside variables that are happening. And activating new quests, putting new items in the black market, and basically owning this entire section of the world and making sure that it all is moving smoothly. So we went through a few publishers, actually, and ended up with Electronic Arts at the end. And one of the stipulations for this deal was that we do a PS2 port of the game to launch alongside of it. And we told them, that's not going to happen, because we were building it for the Xbox, had been the whole time, and we were really pushing it, which was a technically more capable machine than the PS2 at the time. So we told them, we cannot do this. So they hired a couple of extra developers that promised that they could make this happen, and so they were going to do that port for us. So when it still didn't happen, like we told them, they pulled our marketing money as part of the deal. So what that ended up being was a highly rated Metacritic game with low sales, which ended up equaling the end of Oddworld. So at this point, Oddworld, it did completely shut down. The only people that were left were the founders. And I think they've ended up doing some other stuff kind of on their own, but we stopped development at that point. So at this point is when I made my transition to electronic arts. My lead on Stranger's Wrath went to work at Maxis just a few months before, and they were working on a really cool project. So I went up, checked it out, thought it was cool, came on board to work with them again. Well, it was no less or no more than a week when they canceled the project, pulled everybody in the studio that they could to work on The Godfather. So we actually had 300 people in studio working on this game at one point. And so this is where it became all hands on deck, and let's get this thing done. So after that was done, I moved on to be the first level designer on the Simpsons game. And you see here from the blue box art here, I was able to take the processes and my learnings from Oddworld and bring that here. So I actually created a very similar pipeline, and we built things the same way as we did before, getting everything functional, using the same techniques, and then getting it to where it was fun and playable before we moved on to the next thing. In addition, I worked on the Springfield hub, which was very similar to the city that I had done in Stranger's Wrath. So I was able to reuse a lot of those learnings in creating an area where I'm managing what missions are now available, created all of the collectibles areas for people to find stuff, and that's where I actually first even started managing some small groups of people, where I was managing a few designers and their gameplay, and then also an outsourcing team of artists in Salt Lake City. So, but this is where I learned that you need to know your limits. I was working on what we called our Core X, which was our first level, first playable, and I had a really tough deadline, and I got sick. So I worked so hard that I was actually building the game, taking a nap on a couch next to my desk. The build would get done, I would go check, do some more work, build again, take another nap. I got so sick that I got the 90% of the entire team sick. Yeah. So, thank you. Yeah. So when the game shipped, they gave me this plaque, and they dubbed it the J-cell virus. So yeah, so I think back, all these people that were out for 2-3 days at a time, how much I must have cost the company at that point. Sure, they were pretty happy about that. But yeah, it's really important to know what your limits are. Seriously, for me, I learned I can't keep pushing like this. I need to find ways to make sure that I'm able to stay healthy when have these kind of deadlines. So the next thing for me was Godfather 2. And this is where I got my first lead credit. And the focus for me shifted a little bit from working solely on creating things and now getting the opportunity to give design direction, to plan help people plan what the time estimates are for the work that they're going to do, reviewing their work with them and helping give them feedback and that kind of stuff. On top of that, I was still doing level design. So I was actually doing 2 jobs at once. And so I had the first mission, the second mission, and the last mission that I'm building, scripting, bug fixing, the whole 9 yards while giving that direction, which ended up being a lot. So this is where I learned, again, to know my limits, but I did learn I really love the direction part of things, but I need to kind of, when possible, choose which one I'm going to do a little bit more of, because I can't do both, even though I'd love to. So now we come to Volition. This was my first move by choice. And what I mean by that is, there was a lot of company closures there. But this time, I actually wasn't even looking to go anywhere until saw the job posting and was contacted by Volition. And I didn't even know where they were, actually, at the time. And looked them up, saw they were in Champaign, Illinois, which was perfect because I'm from Kentucky and my wife's from Wisconsin. So it was 6 hours from each. Perfect. We can now be close to family. Instead of seeing them once a year, we could see them twice a year. But it was good that 6 hours is perfect, right? Because I can leave in the morning, be there in the afternoon, but they won't ever just show up for dinner. So I had that luxury, which is really nice. But when I got there, that was the thing that actually made me consider it. And when I got there, I saw that I was going to be able to be on Red Faction Armageddon from pre-production all the way through. And for me, this was huge because I've worked on all the various stages of development, but had never started from the beginning and worked all the way through. So, I've been on the project for almost 2.5 years now. It'll be a little more than that once we ship in May. And so that was a really big thing for me. The other thing was the technology. When I saw what they were working on with Gorilla and saw the challenges that I would face in a fully destructible world and creating experiences inside of that was a new challenge for me and something that I thought would be really interesting and something that I wanted to do. So this is where I, again, lead level designer, but this time, before on Godfather, the overall stuff had been kind of planned ahead before I came onto the project. This time coming in, I was able to actually do all of it from the beginning as far as, figuring out what missions we were going to do in the beginning, having everything work together, doing all of the design direction and reviews for stuff as we were moving along. But this meant that I was less hands-on, learning before I couldn't do both. I did get sections where I would go in, create pieces of gameplay and hand it off to someone, but I'm not doing the day-to-day, I'm in there scripting, doing that kind of stuff. Now what my role is more like is working with the guys closely, making sure that the gameplay that they're looking for is what, they're getting what they're looking for. They have the tools that they need. Thinking about the player experience from moment to moment, but also now looking at the game more broadly. And instead of focusing on one level and building that, now I'm looking at everything and saying, how does what people are doing fit with the game across the entire arc? Where are those ups and downs? What adjustments do we need to make sure that the game is fun across the entire spectrum? But it also meant lots of meetings, lots of meetings. There were times where I literally would spend the entire day in meetings. That was not uncommon. But it helps with the communication part sometimes. So one of the last things that I want to bring up is about being realistic with your goals. When you graduate, you're going to have big student loans. And so you need to be really flexible in what kind of work you do. Just keep in mind, all of us have a game in mind that we want to make. But it's really important that you understand that right now is probably not the time to do that. You've got a lot of responsibilities. You've got things that you need to be flexible with. For me, I ended up doing a lot of moving around. I think I moved like 13 times in the last 10 years. You got to do what you have to do to get your first job in this industry, to make sure that you stay in this industry. You'll eventually get your opportunity to do what you want to do, but you've got to be flexible, especially when you're starting out. You have to think long term. Think down the road. Make a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, where you want to be, and then take those steps as you see them to move you toward those plans. Now, the reason I bring it up is I had a 10-year plan when I left here to be a design director on a AAA game title. And I've worked on a lot of AAA games. That's what most of mine have been, and I'm very happy about that and very pleased. But it's funny. This month is actually 10-year anniversary since I graduated from Full Sail, and it was just announced at Volition that I'm going to be design director on my next project. So, yeah, thanks. So now I'm just thinking maybe it should have been a 5-year plan, but yeah. So I'm really excited about that. Going to move on to that, once we finish with this, and really excited about getting that opportunity. And that's what I've got for now. Thank you very much. So I think we're going to do some Q&A now. There's microphones on each side. So if anybody has any questions, feel free.
This will probably be a really quick question. My name's Sean.
Hey.
You were talking about playing the games for the company that you have the potential to interview for. What about using demos instead of full games? And like, for example, Gorilla, I played the demo of it, but I never played the full game. Yeah. Can that be considered enough knowledge of the game?
Absolutely, yeah. To me, it's just important that someone makes the effort to play it, right? If you come in and haven't spent any time with it, then that doesn't show any desire to really help make what we need to make. But yeah, any time that you could spend with it is great. The more, the better.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I want to give a shout out because I'm from actually Charleston, which is about an hour south of Champaign.
Cool.
So it's like my hometown. How's your cinematic department?
How is our cinematic department?
Yeah, like.
As in, well, so we do a few things. For Armageddon, we actually are outsourcing our full cinematics.
Okay.
But we do have a group in-house that are doing our what we call moments, and which are working on in-game type cutscene areas, but aren't full rendered cinematics.
Yeah. Do you guys have a lot of people working on that, or is it just a minimal team?
As far as the in-game stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be pretty sizable. I mean, we have animators, we have various artists, lighters. Just some people split resources amongst stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hello. You said earlier that everyone has that game that they want to make, and they always have it in mind, but you have to wait on it. What's your game that you want to make?
If I tell you, are you going to go make it?
No, but it just seems like it'd be.
No,
cool.
It's really funny for me. The turn-based strategy game that we started to make as our final project is what I would like to do. Final Fantasy Tactics, those types of games are huge for me, and it brought a tear to my eye. My 6-year-old son was playing Tactics the other day on his DS. So, that's what I want to make. I want to make a fully Xbox Live or handheld, internet playable turn-based strategy game someday.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
What's up, Jameson? I just have a quick question. What advice could you give us when it comes to starting indie teams, and especially now with all the problems we may face coming up?
As far as getting a job and getting into the industry?
Well, starting your own team, starting an indie team, and just kind of start your own project, even though you're facing all these types of challenges.
It's really interesting. The thing that I'm seeing these days is it's getting much easier for independent development, right? Things like XNA, the tools that are being provided, for instance, like the new UDK stuff for the iPhone. It's getting really easy for small teams to get together and create something. We actually had a guy that left Volition, started Radiant Games by himself, and is putting games up on their indie store and doing pretty well at it. So now it's interesting because it's enticing, right? But you have to be careful. You have to, like I said before, be responsible and just make sure that you're able to do the things that you need to do if you're going to do something like that. Now, a lot of people ask me about doing stuff like that while being employed by a company like THQ. And that's something that you have to work really closely with them and make sure that's something that's okay and get that stuff approved, because technically they can own that. So you just have to be careful with that kind of stuff and make sure that you are doing it the right way.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Jameson. My name is Brian Wheat.
Hey.
And you talked a little bit about design tests. Could you maybe more elaborate on where we could find some design tests and what kind of questions are in design tests?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, feel free to email me. I can send you all the ones that I found. Most of where I got mine were from taking them. And I would do a design test for a company or ask them for one. But the kind of things that they'll ask is, what is your favorite game? What is your favorite genre, right? A lot of times very simple questions, because they're looking to see what kind of person are you and how do you talk about games, right? And they'll ask things like, for instance, one of the things that I think we actually even ask at Volition is, what are the two things in Saints Row that you would, what are two things that you would improve on Saints Row 2, and two things that you would, two things you liked and two things you would improve? And what we can see from that is, how are you looking at everything? How are you analyzing what you're playing? How are you, thinking creatively about what you're seeing and how you can improve that? And we get some insight into what kind of person you are and how you think design-wise.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Jameson. I'm Rob Buchheit. I just started the Game Design Masters here at Full Sail, and I was wondering, what was the best advice you can give to people who want to be game designers other than the networking, like getting involved with modding or writing your own design documents or what?
The first thing that I always tell people, I get asked a lot about education, and since you are all here, I don't need to tell you that this is the first key, right? You almost have to have a gaming education these days to get into game design. But the other thing that I really stress is you need to start making games now. And what I mean by that is, the first thing I suggest for people that haven't actually built levels and things like that is take a game like Little Big Planet and start using their tools to just, at first, even just recreate something you see in there. So you start evaluating, how are the things built? What do I need to do to build these things? Do something with, with Lego, Indiana Jones, something that you get familiar with building tools. And then do something like, for instance, if you like Gears of War, build a complete mission in their tools. Start actually creating gameplay so you're thinking about, here's what the player is facing second to second. Here's what the experience that I want to create. Start planning it out on paper and go through the whole process. Because when you can show someone, here's the process that I took to do this, one, you get the practice, and two, you have something to show so people see how you did that and how you would fit into their work environment.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yep.
As a environmental artist, I was wondering if you could give me any resources to learning game theory and level design so I can incorporate it into my art.
That's a good question. As far as learning game theory, there's a book called Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell that I recommend to everybody. It takes design from a very basic form. It even starts with play and just basically goes through and talks about what it is, how you can evoke the kind of responses you're looking for, how you need to build games from a very basic form, and then goes into the much broader development. That's what I would suggest for actually learning about design. And what was the other part of the question?
Just resources to learn game theory and level design.
Well, yeah, there's as far as learning level design, that's an interesting one. One of the things that I really suggest for that is watching talks from places like Naughty Dog. They did one recently about level design and what their process is. And basically, anything that you can find there's a lot of resources online. And there's a few books about level design, too, that are pretty good. If anything you can find to kind of go through that and see the process, talk about it, that's what I would suggest.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, my name is David Pierre. I'm actually in final project right now, and I found it interesting how you said that you've had day-long meetings sometimes. I wanted to know what you think would be the hardest part about level design, whether it's within pre-production or just production in general.
I fully believe level design is the hardest in pre-production, mainly because you're basically having to create something out of nothing, right? Sometimes early in pre-production, the story hasn't been fleshed out. You don't know exactly what you're looking for, and you're trying to map out an experience on thinking about second to second, moment to moment. And early in pre-production, all of the mechanics aren't nailed down. You don't know exactly what you have to work with, so you have to be a little flexible. So as far as level design goes, it makes it a little difficult. You have to kind of work with what you know you're going to have, prototype with what you can, but also be flexible and willing to make changes as you need to. You'll find even all the way through the end of production that things are still evolving and you're having to find ways to accommodate the changes that are happening.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Frank Mercurio. I talked to you earlier up in the game studio, but I do have a question about what do you find the job position is hardest to fill at game studios or just in general?
Which position is hardest to fill?
Either on both the art or dev side, which is the game position or the skills that you guys just really just need to find usually.
Yeah. Usually the toughest thing to find, honestly, is people with a lot of experience, especially in a place like Champaign, Illinois, because nobody wants to live there. So it gets cold. But the big thing for us is trying to find people that have a lot of experience. One of the things we found, though, we've had a lot of luck with hiring graduates recently because we're finding that the skill base that they're coming out with gives us a baseline for technically what we're looking for, and the rest can be taught. So we're finding that it's not as difficult now to fill those positions as it was before, but it's always difficult to find the more experienced people. That's the biggest thing for us.
Okay. To elaborate more on the question though, is there any specific job positions, like job titles that are harder to fill And if so, would you say it's because of experience? You want a more experienced person for that position, or it's just you can't find someone who knows and can do what you want them to do?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a particular position that's hard to fill, to be honest. Like, I think it really just comes down to who's available at the time and what do you have available. It's really interesting to try and find, for instance, writers who have a writing background in games. Trying to fill things like a lead designer position is really difficult, and you have to be very careful with something like that because you need someone that will fit into the culture well, and it becomes more of a fit than it is an experience type thing. But as far as like an actual position that's generally the hardest, I don't know that there is one, in my opinion.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I was curious, when you went to Volition, you said you voluntarily moved there. How sensitive are companies to people just leaving for other companies?
They don't like it. But we don't like it when they lay us off either, right? You know, the thing that was interesting for me there was I had a really good relationship with EA. Things were going well there. I gave them a month head notice and got the game through up to alpha before I left, just so, you know, it was like, look, I don't want to leave you guys hanging. This is a move that I feel like I need to make. But I want to make sure that I'm not burning bridges here, that everybody's, you know, at least okay with what's going on and nobody's going to be upset about it. Everybody moves around. This industry is very volatile. Companies are always closing, opening, hiring, laying off. So there's a general understanding that people need to move around. It's okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Jameson. My name's Josh. I was just interested in knowing, like, in terms of design, what games have influenced you the most and why?
Wow. Okay. The Super Mario Brothers 3 is probably the first one as far as level design goes. Just because I really felt like it, you know, any Mario game really, the way that they built things, you could almost play with your eyes closed. And if you can do that, I feel like you found a good level design. They've even took it into the thing that's impressed me the most recently is Super Mario Galaxy. Because of the way they built the levels, you almost felt like the controls were reading your mind. So for me, those are the big things that kind of influenced me. But on the other side, like I mentioned Final Fantasy II before. That was the best story that I'd ever seen in a game. And of course, now it's probably pales in comparison to some things that we have. But it was something that really struck a chord with me and something that I felt brought the games, could bring games closer to art than just something that you do in the evenings and on the weekend. So for me, that was some pretty inspiring stuff.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Jameson, I'm one of the master students here, and I was just kind of wondering, you've been in the industry for a long time, so I'm sure you've got some production horror stories, like things that just did not go well for you guys. So I was wondering if maybe you could give us a good one and tell us how you got through it.
Oh, man. Well, you know, the big thing one thing that happens a lot, and I kind of mentioned this before, is that when you're planning early, things are so volatile that you end up having to alter a lot and keep moving. So one of the things that we deal with constantly is having to accommodate for changes. Things are cut. This ability you thought you were going to have for an enemy is gone. Now you have to rebuild a part of a level to accommodate it. So those are kind of things that are very common. The thing that has always been the biggest frustration for me and that I've never seen work well is outsourcing, ever. Every time that I've worked on something where we tried to outsource, it has either come in out of deadline, it's come in over cost. It never works out the way that we think it's going to, and then we end up having to push people really hard to try and accommodate and fix that stuff at the end. Now, the biggest thing for me, though, that was the biggest red flag and like, what in the world is going on, was on The Godfather. When I went to work on one project, suddenly everyone was like panicked. I don't know exactly what caused the panic at the time, but projects just started getting shelved and people started moving and like everybody was being taken up there and I was like, what is going on? So like they basically brought in everybody. So it was crazy. We had 12 guys in a 14 by 14 room with no windows. So they actually brought in a moving air conditioner and stuck it in the middle of the room because it was like 110 degrees in there without it. So that was a challenging time, but we got through it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
My name is Omar. I'm actually a faculty member here on campus, and we have a couple questions from online, if
Cool.
you're willing to take a couple more.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. First of all, Kevin wants to know how awesome it is to work with him.
So, I don't know how to answer that question. So Kevin's a cool guy. He's doing a really good job. I don't have any reason to be upset with him yet.
I'm sure he appreciates that. He's online right now. He says hi. All right, so if someone already has a degree in the computer science program and they want to go for one in the game design, is it actually a good idea for them to start applying as soon as they can? Should they wait to get the other degree? What do you think is the best practice with that?
So you mean like CS people that want to work in the games industry? Is that what you mean?
If they, well, the question was written as if they are also going for a game design degree.
Okay.
And if they should apply early and just try to find a job whenever they can. 'Cause
Okay.
they might have the opportunity to come up.
This actually came up yesterday when I was talking with some people, and this industry is very small. What I believe about this industry is when you can get a job, take it. Because yes, education is important. I don't want to negate that in any way. Don't misunderstand me, but education is all about getting a job. And in this industry, once you get your first one and you get in, it's very easy to stay in. So in that situation, I would start looking while you're doing the degree for sure.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Have you actually had a chance to look at the current game design courses that we have online at Full Sail? And what are your opinions about the courses and how do they compare to your education here?
Oh, that's interesting. Only a little bit. It's something actually that was brought up yesterday and that I'm wanting to look into a little bit more. So let me look into that, and then I'll get some information out there about that.
All right. And okay, one more here. How often do you see people that come into your company or into the game industry in general, and they're actually working in a popular company, a software company, and they actually come in and are put into a basic programming position or a junior level programming position because they don't have game experience? Is that something you see often, or do you actually take into account experience elsewhere?
So you mean outside of industry experience and then coming into the industry? It really depends. I think programming is one area where I've seen a lot of guys come from banking, things like that, and they're able to kind of move into mid-level positions because of that basic coding knowledge. When it comes to design, we tend to really kind of require that someone have some kind of knowledge in the industry. So if they're coming in, if they're able to get that job, it would be some kind of an entry-level position almost always.
All right, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
Sorry. You mentioned about games and Final Fantasy II made you realize that games were closer to art, and it sparked an interest in your views. About 6 to 9 months ago, for people who don't know, Roger Ebert put out a thing saying that games are not art, and I know Daniel Craig in his Extra Credit series has been talking about this a lot, and I wanted to get your opinions on the whole controversy.
I should have never said that. It's really funny because Ebert actually was in Champaign when he said that. I think he was anyway. But, it's such a tough thing. To me, art is about, the expression and the way people absorb what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. It's about the experience. And I've had some moments in games where I was so immersed and so, enthralled in what I was doing that I felt like I was there. And to me, that, if you can get that kind of experience out of something, how can you not at least consider it as art? So for me, I think that there's absolutely games we can consider art, and hopefully people will start to think that way in the near future.
Jameson Durall, y'all.